Is this better? It feels better. Is this better? Monica? Mike, can you hear me? All right. We gotta talk loud, Rebecca. Okay, good evening and welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for coming to tonight's program. I know you're gonna have a lot of fun and learn some interesting things and enjoy the awesome beer that they brew right here at Emmett's. And keep telling me if you can't hear me. I'll keep trying. My name is Vicki Martin, and I am the organizer of today's event. And I want to thank you in advance for your patience with the seating. Our registration count jumped from 58 to 84 in about 4 hours one day last week, and it just made chaos out of everything. So here we are. Yeah, we were going to cut it off at 75, but we were too late. Anyways, again, thank you for your patience, and yay, what a problem to have, right? I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Palatine area, which includes Palatine, Rolling Meadows, the Barringtons, Schaumburg, and Hoffman Estates. The League is a nonpartisan political organization. We were founded 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago now, here in Chicago. We are comprised of men and women of all political viewpoints. And even though our individual members have their own individual political viewpoints, the League itself has never and will never endorse a party or a candidate. So no matter what you might hear, the League is steadfastly nonpartisan. A couple of housekeeping details before we get going any further. The restrooms are right outside the door in that little alcove. That's important when you have beer. Although good luck getting out of the room. If you have requested a non-alcoholic option, some of you were given little tags, but some of you weren't, so just share your beer with your friends or tell your waitress to take it away, whatever is easiest for you. If you have a non-alcoholic option, you may order soft drinks, coffee, tea, lemonade. If you want something else, you have to negotiate that with your waitress. And it's not included in your price, so bear that in mind. On your table, you'll find some flyers and some example ballots. And those are for you to take home. The little flyer is really an at-home, do-it-yourself version of ranked choice voting. So you can play ranked choice voting at your holiday parties. You can rank your Halloween candy, you can rank your favorite side dish for Thanksgiving, your favorite Christmas cookies. You can use ranked choice voting to choose your next family vacation. And once you see how this works, you realize how useful it really is as a decision-making process. Also, those of you who are not drinking beer, you can still vote. Because, let's face it, in a real election, some of us vote by the color of the candidate, by the gender of the candidate, by the name of the candidate. So if you want to choose your beer by which name you like the best, that's okay, because that's just like a real election. Because we're such a huge group, tabulating paper ballots will be impossible. So we are going to challenge you technologically, and we are going to vote using your cell phones. And it's not hard. I can hear the moaning and the eye rolling, but that's all right. Those of you who are more tech savvy, please help your neighbors. Our speaker, Rebecca, will explain the whole process to you. It's really super slick and brainless, so don't worry about it. In the event, for some reason, you're completely incapable of doing it on your phone, use one of the paper ballots and just let us know, and we'll collect it at the end and mix it into the equation. A couple other real quick things. I want to introduce a couple of important people who are with us here tonight. First of all, Kathy Cortez. Wave your hand, Kathy. Kathy is the president of the Palatine League. Also, we have with us Shannon Silverman and Sarah Wadowitz, who are the co-presidents of the Arlington Heights Mount Prospect and Buffalo Grove League, Wave High. And we are especially honored to have Becky Simon with us, who is the president of the League of Women Voters of Illinois. Becky. There's a couple other people. If any of you are interested in getting information about the league, with Juanita Kendall, Liz Pennick, and Carol Peadock, raise your hand. Look for these ladies. They'll tell you everything you need to know. Alrighty, so now I would like to tell you a little bit about our speaker, Rebecca. Rebecca. Oh, I should do it like this, right? Okay. You see this, Rebecca? Off the mic. Okay, like you're a rock star. You are a rock star. Rebecca Radcliffe Williams lives in Willowbrook and is the statewide organizer for Fair Vote, Illinois. She was the campaign manager for Evanston's successful campaign, making them the first city in Illinois to adopt ranked choice voting for municipal elections. Now just think about our municipal elections where you have 15 people running for school board. When you see this process, you'll understand why it's so great. Rebecca has been involved in policy advocacy and organizing work since 2017 with an initial focus on environmental issues. She has a passion for systemic reform that can appeal to all sides of the political spectrum. Rebecca Radcliffe Williams, she's in Army Red.
Hello everyone. It is so wonderful to see so many people out on this Thursday night who are really passionate about the way we vote. Or maybe you're just passionate about beer, but I hope that by the end of this evening, I will have effectively convinced you that our voting does need an upgrade and that ranked choice voting is a really great option for that. But yeah, some housekeeping at the start here, because I know all of you have several pieces of paper on your table and maybe you're like, what's all this about? What are we doing with this? So yeah, as Vicki explained, you've got your flights of beer and we're going to be ranking these. And why are we ranking these? Because it's fun and it gives you an excuse to try all these different beers and everything. But we also want to do that because we want to show you how easy it is to rank, right? With ranked choice voting, sometimes when we introduce the concept to people, people might say that's a little complicated or voters can understand it. Once you get to that ballot, you're going to see it's really intuitive. So, the way your flights work, just real quick, if you look at it, starting, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, starting in the upper left-hand side. So upper left-hand is 1, and then you just go diagonal down to 2, and then go up again 3, 4, and then 5 on the end. Yes?
Okay, so when you go to the voting card, it doesn't have numbers on it. Are these in the same order?
It's in the same order. That's a fantastic question. Yeah.
Also, by the way, a lot of the flyers don't have the QR code.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna, let's see. So what you're gonna need to do is on all of your tables, there is just one of these flyers that says rank your beer at the top. So you don't need to take these home, these are just for the event, right? But yeah, it says rank your beer at the top, so I know they look kind of similar, but find that one at your table. And it's gonna have the names of all the beers, descriptions of them, of course, just go off your taste, or the name, or whatever, like Vicki was saying. And then at the bottom here, it's gonna have the QR code. So the QR code is what you need to just take your phone's camera, hover that over, and when you see the link pop up, you click the link, and then you're ready to fill that out whenever you like. I encourage you to just, kind of sip on the beers, sample all of them while I go through this presentation, and then just make sure to fill out that ballot at some point. The other flyers that are on your table are just for you to take home. They're just kind of a reminder of how ranked choice voting works, giving you some ideas of how to maybe use it in your own life if you want to try that out sometime, as well as having our website on it. And then yes, and as Vicki mentioned, if anyone needs a paper ballot, maybe your phone has died, maybe you left your phone at home, you want to be really present, something like that, just raise your hand, and Mark does have a few paper ballots, so he can get those out. We just don't have the time, but if you need them, he'll get them to you. And then last thing before I get into the presentation here, we're going to have a clipboard going around for sign-ups for Fairwood, Illinois. We are the group that's working on this throughout Illinois, so if you want to stay on if you want to get on our mailing list and be kept in touch with what we're doing,
I felt the same thing a little.
I can yell, but I don't want to be like screeching. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we did it.
So yeah, a clipboard will be going around if you want to sign up with Fairwood, Illinois, be on our mailing list. If you do that, please just make sure to put your zip code and check if you're interested in ever volunteering or donating with us, and that way we'll know to reach out to you about that. Is that feedback too bad, or is that better? Okay, cool. So I'll get started with the presentation here. So as I said, voting needs an upgrade. The sad truth of America today is that we are just too polarized. Good. Go ahead. Our politics are broken. We all feel this. And yeah, so if you have been feeling that yourself, you're certainly not alone. You know, maybe you really try to stay informed. You try to always vote and make it so good people are getting elected. But somehow we're still ending up with this bad system where most are dissatisfied. As you see in a lot of polls that we have, 86% of people say the government is broken, and public trust is just at a historic low. So next slide, please. So we're clearly a divided nation, and a big part of this is we often only have two choices, right? We're red or we're blue, and a lot of times the people that are put forward to the ultimate, general elections, they're on the pretty extreme ends of that. So it just really helps to increase that division. And so I'm going to talk about how that happens with the way we vote. So a lot of times people don't realize that the way we vote, at least most of the way we vote in Illinois, does not require a majority in order for people to win. It only requires a plurality. So that means that if you have a race with more than two people in it, you don't necessarily have to get that 50% plus one number. You can win with less than 50% as long as you just have the most votes. And what this does is it makes it so for the voter, and you can click through a couple here, for the voter, we have to, instead of always voting for our true preference, we have to make considerations such as, does my candidate have a chance of winning? Or am I going to be wasting my vote if I vote for this candidate? Maybe they're third party, or maybe they're just lesser known in a local election. And then from the candidate's end, they're just looking for how they can win, right? They're looking for how they can work this system. So they think of things like, what's the least number of votes I need to win? Oh yeah, and yeah, you'll have plenty of time throughout this presentation to rank the beers and everything. So yeah, so hopefully we're just want to make sure everyone's understanding it throughout. But yeah, so candidates just think, what's the least number of votes I need to win? And they also know that demonizing their opponent or opponents is a really good strategy, as opposed to just kind of focusing on what's great about them and their political platform. Next slide, please. So, we all kind of know how this goes. In every election, at least, you know, especially the presidential and everything, we hear, you know, oh no, if you're right-leaning, like, don't you dare vote for that libertarian. Go ahead. Yeah, because if you do that, then the Democrat might win, right? And yeah, if you're more right-leaning. Same thing applies on the other side. If you vote for Green Party, you know, don't you dare, because that means the evil Republican is then going to win. But if we think about it, that's not great to, oh, go ahead, yeah. That's not great to be telling people don't vote your true preference. But we all know why we say that. We know how it goes, because that's just the way our voting system is set up, where you can have those spoiler votes because of the way this works. So for the candidates too, rather than discussing the issues and saying where they really shine and why they would be great for the country or your city, whatever it is, they just attack their opponents, and it's frustrating and demoralizing, and it doesn't leave us voters generally feeling as if we have great options. So just a couple examples to illustrate this plurality concept that I'm talking about is these are real elections that happened. I think this one was maybe, yeah, from 2010. And I'm not trying to necessarily like slight anyone in these examples, but just to say this is how it goes down. So Robin Gable, who is still in office right now, she won out of the primary with just over 27% of the vote. That means that over 72% of people in that primary voted for someone other than Robin Gable. Now, if we had ranked choice voting, maybe she still would have been victorious. Maybe she had the most support, but we just have no idea. Next slide. And then we see this, you know, of course, on the Republican side too. So in 2020, we have in the primary, Paul Jacobs. He went forward with only about 33% of the vote. So not only is this not great because it's not reflecting like true voter preference, but sometimes, you know, when you see these general elections where both candidates really seem kind of bad or kind of extreme, and you're like, how do we get stuck with these people? Well, it's because they can win with these really small majorities. And again, I'm not trying to attack any Illinois politicians. I'm not saying that's happened here, but I think we can see that throughout the country in certain areas where we wonder, how did they even get through? How did they get on the ballot? Well, this is how that happens. Go ahead. And then even when we require a majority, like they do in Chicago, we're still left with this really inefficient system, because if a place requires a majority, then what often happens is you have to have a runoff if they have many people running. And we could update this slide with the most recent Chicago election, because the same thing just happened. But we've had this one from 2019 for a while, where there were 14 candidates. And so, of course, it's going to be impossible for anyone to get a majority in that first round. Inevitably, they're going to go to a runoff, which is just going to force voters to come out all over again. The turnout's not going to be the same, and it costs taxpayer money. But then the other important aspect of it is these two who advanced to the runoff, again, we have no idea if they really had majority support. Between the two of them, they got less than 35% of the vote. So if we had ranked choice voting, again, we can just so much better see that majority preference reflected. So yeah, this is not democracy, but fortunately, we can do better. I think we must do better. And the way to do that we propose with Fair Vote Illinois is ranked choice voting. And I should say real quick, because of course we're the League of Women Voters event, ranked choice voting is a nonpartisan reform. We're a nonpartisan organization. It's really just better for the voters. It can work well for any party, but it's about making things better for us. So, I want to explain how exactly this works. And then after the presentation, there will be plenty of time for questions. So if at any point you're like, I'm not quite understanding this, or what about this thing? Don't worry, you'll be able to ask your questions. And then after that, we're going to reveal the results of the Rank Your Beer poll that everyone is filling out throughout the evening here. Because, yeah, you'll be able to see how that works in real time. But with ranked choice voting, we don't only consider your first choice, we consider second, third, fourth, because especially with crowded races, like maybe a crowded municipal election or a crowded primary field that's happening, you might have several candidates that you like, or even in something like the general for president, maybe you want to vote third party, but of course, even though you want to vote third party, you have a second choice too, and you want to be able to express that. So this just really allows you to do that. So this is how the process works. So yeah, again, with ranked choice voting, you need majority support to win. That's 50% plus 1. So if in a race you get that in the first round, cool, you move forward, nothing else is needed. But we're talking about a race here where no one got to that 50% in the first round. So all of these characters, maybe they're running for mayor of Toontown, right? And so here we have Daffy Duck that secured 38% of the vote, but and in our typical system, he would win, but that's not actually majority. So we're going to see how this shakes out. So in the next round, this is what happens. We eliminate the lowest vote getter. In this case, that was Wile E. Coyote, because there's no way he can win, right? So we eliminate him, and then we redistribute all of his second choices. So we can see that some of those went to Roadrunner, some went to Sylvester, Bugs Bunny, all of them, kind of distributed throughout. And then we check it out. Does anyone have majority support now? Nope. We do this process again. So Sylvester, he was the lowest now, and we redistribute his second choices. Or maybe it's a third choice, because maybe the second choice was Wile E. Coyote, but now he's out, so you go with third choice, whatever. And then still, no one has a majority. It's a tight race. So we've got to eliminate Roadrunner. And this is where we actually see the Bugs Bunny emerges victorious with 54% of the vote. So what we know happened here is Bugs Bunny, even though he initially was not everyone's first choice, he did a better job than Daffy Duck of reaching out to the community and saying, this is my message, this is what I'm going to do for everyone. And so ultimately he was more popular even if he wasn't everyone's first choice. Go ahead. So yeah, so just as a reminder of some of the benefits of this is you are, again, this really changes the way candidates campaign. You are voting for the candidates all of a sudden as opposed to against someone else. Right now, a lot of times we vote really strategically because we think, okay, who do I hate? Who would it be awful if they won, right? Now who am I going to vote for who I think could beat them? And again, like you can still put that as one of your choices, but with this you get to vote for your true preferences, which I think does such a better job of encouraging a good democracy. And of course, that makes it so there are more than 2 viable options. We don't need runoffs, which, it's often a lower voter turnout with those. It's a waste of taxpayer money. And I mean, it's so frustrating with Georgia every couple of years, right? We all have to wait like another month to get the results of that. You have Senate or House hanging in the balance. And then also, I'm sure it's super frustrating for Georgians because they're having to deal with another month of attack ads. So being able to eliminate those is really, really wonderful while still getting that majority support because you just do it all in one. And then there's no more vote splitting too. So a common thing that we see in especially primaries or maybe crowded municipal fields is there are several candidates that are kind of in the same lane, right? Like they might have pretty similar ideas, and maybe they've got a good amount of support amongst the community, but with our current system, they can easily split that vote and then none of them get elected. And so that makes it really difficult for the voter. It also creates some infighting within the parties usually. Because, maybe people will be told, you shouldn't run now, you're gonna split the vote, you're gonna mess this up, you need to wait your turn. With ranked choice voting, people are just free to run and share their ideas, and that ultimately strengthens the platforms as opposed to just weakening it when you split that vote. And then it also, as I'm speaking to, it tends to make campaigning more civil from the candidate side. And we have data to back this up, at least on the local level. So when they first used it in New York City, a lot of people said they felt the tone was about the same. But for those who noticed a change, they overwhelmingly said it was more positive. And when we were doing the Evanston campaign, we actually had someone come and speak who had won for the first time in New York City under ranked choice voting. And she said, they researched it, her campaign staff, and they saw that the best tactic was just to be really positive and focus on what she wanted to do for the community. Not all of the people running against her did that, and she ultimately emerged victorious. So yeah, that's just some people who've used it saying their experience with it. So yeah, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, some people do worry, okay, this sounds like a nice idea, but is it going to be too complicated? Is it going to be difficult for the voter? And the great thing is that in the places where this is implemented, voters overwhelmingly say that it was easy, simple to understand, and they want to keep using it. So we can see in New York City, extensive exit polling, and 95% said it was easy. Of course, you do voter education before when you implement it in a new area, but
They have to vote to use this vote.
yes, and I can kind of get into that, but yeah.
Put the mic a little lower. It's like you're getting a lot of feedback.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's better.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely voters find that it's easy to rank as long as it's just explained to them beforehand. It's simple, and we often rank things inadvertently in our mind without even realizing it. I hope the ranking review process is easy for all of you, phone technology aside. But of course, when you're voting in a voting booth, you don't have to do that. But yeah, so that's a great thing that we see where it's used. And another great side effect that comes with ranked choice voting is it wasn't necessarily designed this way, but we see that a lot more women and candidates of color have been elected in the places that it's used. And we think that this is just attributed to the fact that people are voting their true preference. No longer are they thinking, okay, well, this candidate is great, but they don't have a chance of winning, right? Who cares if they have a chance of winning? You can still put them first, and then you can put a second choice. And it makes it so we actually start seeing the true support for people. And as it turns out, a lot more of those candidates win. with ranked choice voting. Go ahead. And yeah, here's Maya Wiley, who was in the NYC mayoral race. She's talking about how even though she didn't win, you know, they kind of had this sort of inverted worry that it was going to split the black vote and none of them were going to win. But as I mentioned, as long as it's, I mean, as sometimes people vote on race or gender or whatever, but as long as the candidates are pretty similar, they're probably going to rank all of them, and then that makes it so one of them wins. And then, yeah, as I said, if we happen to be in an area that has runoffs, which is not most of Illinois, but it is Chicago, and a few other municipalities have those, you can just eliminate that because there's no longer a need for it, and it saves a lot of trouble for the voters and candidates in addition to saving money. So yeah, I hope that now that I've kind of explained ranked choice voting, you're thinking, this is really cool. This is something I'd like to see throughout Illinois, like maybe in your city's elections or for statewide or federal. So I want to kind of talk a bit about the work that Fair Vote Illinois is specifically doing to help make that happen. And just how you can help with that. So first thing, just join our mailing list. As I mentioned, I have no idea where it is right now, but there's, there should be a clipboard going around, lots of sign-up sheets on that. So if you think to yourself, I do want to stay informed with what's going on, then please put your information on that list and you'll stay in touch with us. You can also volunteer to help. So if you want to check that volunteer box, that's wonderful, and we'll reach out to you. And our volunteers do everything from, policy research to canvassing to introducing us to groups to speaking to their representatives. There's all sorts of ways you can help with ranked choice voting. If you like to use social media, we're on all the socials, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're even on TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but we're on it. And then, of course, getting to speak to groups or organizations like I am doing tonight. This is wonderful. That is a great way that we spread our message. So if you are, I assume a lot of you are, formally with the League of Women Voters, but if you're also part of other groups that might want us to come speak to them about ranked choice voting, it would be great if you reach out and say, hey, could I connect you with them and we do a presentation. All right, and then another great way you can help, of course, is just by donating. If you feel like you want to do that, you can go to, it's real easy, fairvoteillinois.org/donate. Campaigns cost money. It costs money just to do all the outreach that we constantly do. So that's a great way to keep our group going. And then just speaking briefly to the legislative action that's happening right now and just how we could ultimately get this statewide. So the states that have adopted ranked choice voting so far, which is Alaska and Maine, they have done it through a ballot initiative. So they got that on the statewide ballot, and then the people voted for it. Oregon and Nevada are about to do the same thing for their November 24 ballots. So the voters in those states will have a chance to decide. Unfortunately, in Illinois, we don't have such a mechanism. So here, we have to depend on the legislature to enact it, which means we just need a lot of public pressure, and we need to make it popular. We need to normalize it. So a lot of the work that we're focusing on right now, in addition to simple education, is getting it for a lot of municipalities throughout the state. As Vicki mentioned at the beginning, we just got it for Evanston last year. We're hoping to bring it to a lot more. And then one thing that is happening at the statewide level is they have formed, or they're about to form, a ranked choice voting task force, just to kind of explore what statewide implementation would look like what counties need to have their equipment switched over, all the nitty-gritty logistics of it, which is important. So hopefully that goes great, and the legislature is able to feel more at ease with what that process would look like, so that our case to them in the future is a little better. But yeah, so that's everything I have for the presentation. And and I actually do want to, so I said we're doing a lot of municipal work. The way that we get it for municipalities is by a voter referendum. So we have to get a binding referendum on the ballot, and then the voters have to vote yes for it. But yeah, so that's it, and I'll take any questions now.
I've got a question. As we're going through the process, how are the votes at the bottom reallocated, Scott?
Yeah, so the voters.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah. So she asked, as you eliminate the person with the lowest amount of votes, how are those reallocated? They're reallocated based on what the voters marked as their second choice. So,
So our your choice,
mhm.
if the number 5 gets reallocated to 4 and 2 1.
Yeah. So when we look at the rank your beer choice results, which by the way, I should pause and just remind everyone to do that poll if you haven't already. If you have a paper ballot that you got from Mark, just make sure to fill that out and hold it up for him whenever that's ready. Oh, you need a paper ballot here. It's like, yeah. But yeah, because he'll just manually enter those. But, okay. I wanted to cover so you can hear me. So yeah, to answer your question, when a candidate has the lowest amount of votes and they're eliminated, the way those are reallocated is we look at the second choice that all of those voters gave. Does that make sense? No, it's all done, yeah, it's all done in one evening, yeah.
It's doing it right now.
Yeah, so with that Mayor of Toontown election, if Wiley Coyote had 100 votes, if Wiley Coyote had 100 votes, and all of those voters gave a second choice, then those second choices would just be redistributed to whoever it was. Yeah, question?
You don't have to vote for all 5. Only vote for 1, 2, 3.
That's a great question. So she just asked, essentially how many do you have to vote for? Do you have to vote for everyone? You don't have to vote for everyone. So ranked choice voting is about giving you the option to rank multiple choices. But if you really only like one candidate and you don't feel good voting for anyone else, or you maybe only like 2, you can absolutely do that. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. So she just asked, what about elections with this crazy candidate field, like 9 or 14, right? Like, are we ranking 14? Generally, the voter software does cap it at some point. We have found that most softwares cap it at 5 or 6. So generally, you can rank up to 5 or 6. There might be somewhere you can rank more, but I don't think most people want to actually rank more than that. So that seems to be a pretty good number for voters. Yeah?
So, do you require new voting machines if you switch to ranked choice?
Yeah, so in Illinois, we have. Huh? Oh, yeah, sorry. She asked if new voting machines are required to implement ranked choice voting. In Illinois, we have a very decentralized way of doing voting. So all the counties or the few cities that handle their own voting, they get to choose what equipment they use. It's not all the same throughout the state. So it's going to vary depending on the county. There are a lot of counties or cities where they have equipment that's fully good to go. It actually wouldn't cost anything, or they wouldn't have to really do a change to start using ranked choice voting. Others might just need a simple software upgrade. Others that have much older equipment, they would have to get all new equipment. It just depends on the county. But I will say that currently in Illinois, about 80% of the voters are in places where it's either ranked choice voting ready, or it would be very simple to start using ranked choice voting. Yeah. Yeah, so she asked, how exactly did it get passed in Evanston? So just to be clear for Evanston, their first implementation will be in April 25. That's when they're going to first get to use it for their municipal elections. But the way that happened there is we had to get a binding referendum on the ballot. So the lead up to that was we started doing a lot of outreach to just general Evanston people, going to farmers markets and canvassing, things like that. And then we partnered with some local organizations there who were favorable toward ranked choice voting. And with them, we started to lobby the Evanston City Council. And that process was that was several months where we were just talking to them, addressing questions and concerns while we continued to still build support in the community. And ultimately, they decided to put it on the ballot. We do have another option, and that's getting on the ballot by way of petition. That's something we might explore in certain cities, but that's just not the route we took with Evanston. And then, of course, once it was on the ballot, then we just ran a good old campaign to inform voters about it and why they should vote yes.
Why is it taking until 25?
Because that's when their next municipal election is. Yes. I mean, well, I think they just had one like this round, but like that was too close, right? So they need time. Any other questions?
A thanks and a personal question. So, you're younger than a couple of us in this room. So first of all, thank you for representing a younger generation.
My pleasure.
And tell me what motivated you to do this.
Yeah. So, like I said, I have a passion for reforms that appeal to, like, are nonpartisan and can appeal to everyone. But for me personally, so I like that about it, but I get very frustrated by telling everyone they should vote when I know that a lot of the time their vote, they don't really have a great choice, right? Or like if they want to vote third party, it would be a waste, and they're not getting to vote their true preference. It was really frustrating hearing, I was tracking the Chicago election, even though I'm not in Chicago anymore, and hearing people say, oh, I really love so-and-so candidate. Did you vote for them? No, she's not going to win. Stuff like that. So I love telling people to vote and telling them to be more active within their democracy, but I think we actually need a good voting system in order to be able to say that with our chest. Thank you.
How do we get more young people like you?
Well, I mean, I am very, very happy to have the older generation involved, just first of all. Retired people have a lot of time sometimes, so it's really, really wonderful whenever any of you choose to use your time on efforts like this. So not just like your generations. But I will say that at least within our group at Fairvote, Illinois, it's pretty heavily millennial, which is what I am. We haven't gotten I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty heavily millennial, but then we even have like a couple really amazing high schoolers who are super active. I mean, for two of our local chapters, the Oak Park chapter and the DuPage County chapter, chapter leads for those are high schoolers. They're like juniors or seniors. So I think they're learning about it. They often learn about it through their teachers. So thank you to those teachers who are doing that work of introducing them to the concept. But yeah, I think when people learn about ranked choice voting, they like it. So it's more just about us getting it out there. And I think they're really drawn to that for the reasons I said. Where like everyone's telling them to vote, but they're like, well, will my vote even matter? So we need to make it so it does.
Slide that said that negative campaigning against other candidates no longer works. So would ranked choice voting decrease the effectiveness or the incidence or amount of this negative campaigning that's been going on so much in this election?
Yeah, definitely. And that's not to say like it will eliminate it completely, but the thing is, super negative campaigning is no longer a smart strategy with ranked choice voting. And the reason for that is because even if you can't be a voter's first choice, you want to be their second or third, especially if it's a pretty broad field, right? Like you understand no one's going to get the majority in that first round. So you want to be as many people's second or third choice as possible. If you are just attacking the other candidates and being really negative about them, then the people who like those candidates first, they're going to think, that person's a jerk. I don't want to vote for them even if I like their ideas. Like, yeah. So that's really where it decentralizes that.
In your example, you just went first and second choice, but you just mentioned third choice. So when does the third choice?
So in that example, it was 5 candidates. Oh yeah, just thank you. Yeah, he was saying, when like we looked at second choice, when does third choice come into play? With that example, it was 5 candidates, and we had to eliminate 3 before we found that true majority. So for some people, you might have actually gotten to their third choice. It just depends. Like if, I'm trying to remember the order.
If nobody gets to the majority choices, then you go back and look at the third choice.
So like if your first choice was Wile E. Coyote, he was eliminated. So then maybe your second choice was Sylvester, thank you. So then second choice was Sylvester, so then Sylvester gets eliminated. So then maybe your third choice, then maybe you're a person who put Roadrunner for your third choice, and then Roadrunner gets eliminated, right? That's when you're actually going to get into that third choice. But maybe Wile E. Coyote was your first choice, and then your second choice was Daffy Duck. So in that case, your second choice is just going to chill there, because your second choice is he's got a good chance of winning. The only time we're looking at your other choices, like your votes kind of be moved around like that, is when it's no longer viable. So if one of your choices is for like a candidate who's viable, that's great. Then it's sitting there and it's helping them potentially win. But ranked choice voting is about making it so people can always vote their true preference. So even if it is a candidate like Wile E. Coyote that just, maybe he had a really low funded campaign, Maybe he was just kind of a jerk, but he appealed to a few people. They still were able to vote for him. Yeah, they still were able to vote for him without fear of like wasting their vote because they put other people. Yeah.
But there is actually ranked choice voting. How often does the candidate who has got the most votes on first round end up winning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, it's when candidates are getting that plurality vote initially, how often do they ultimately become the winner? They win most of the time with ranked choice voting because generally, if they have that plurality, they've got a good lead. It shows they did a good job of reaching out in the community, and they often emerge victorious. But we do see some cases where they do not win, and when that is the case, it is when what they did is they appealed to a small base of the community and they didn't get any support outside of that. So maybe they got 30 or 35%, but no more than 35% were ever gonna like them. And so when we start shifting the votes around to see the majority, that's when they lose.
Who opposes ranked choice voting and why?
Yeah, so her question was just, what's the opposition to ranked choice voting and why? So the main opposition to ranked choice voting comes from people who are already in power. Whether that's Democrats or Republicans, we get a bit of fire from both sides. It's not really extreme yet because it's still, I mean, it's used in a lot of cities, it's used in a couple states, but it's still not mainstream within the US, obviously. But yeah, generally it's people already in power because they think, well, I won with this system. I don't know if I want to shake things up. I don't know if I can still win with that new system. The other thing we often hear is, they'll say, that's too confusing, voters aren't going to understand it. But again, all the data we have just shows that that's not true. Even if we think it's going to be true, it's not in an area. So that's the main stuff. Yeah.
How many cities in the United States are getting
Yeah, so she asked how many cities. Sorry?
Where are you getting your statistics from?
Yeah, so she asked how many cities are currently using it, and it's 52. So with all of those cities, we're groups such as FairVote in particular, not to be confused with FairVote Illinois, we're the statewide group, but there's a national FairVote that's very research and data focused and everything. And they are constantly looking into all these elections and seeing what we can learn from them. So that is how we continue to have more and more data that helps us learn how this is looking.
How many states do
It's currently in 2 states. It's in Alaska and Maine, used for all their federal and statewide elections.
On our ballots, there are some races where you select 3 candidates to win. How does ranked choice voting work with that, or does it?
It does, yeah. It can work really well with that. That's a different type called proportional ranked choice voting. I won't get into the details of how that's tabulated because it's just a little trickier. But basically, you still have to, with proportional ranked choice voting, you still have to hit a certain threshold. So you're making sure a good amount of the community is still wanting the 3 or the 4 people who get elected, which is not always the case right now. Sometimes if you have, it's like a pick 3. If there are 10 people on the ballot, you can have people winning with like 12% of the vote. So it is useful even in those circumstances.
Follow up to that question.
Yeah.
On the voter side, in those instances, does it still look the same? Like 1 to 10, rank your top 3. Just the mathematics and the counting in the background is different, or does it look different for the voter?
Yeah. So great question. So you're saying with the proportional RCV, is it kind of similar to how it would be with single winner, where you're just ranking. And yes, on the voters' end, it's still very easy. And instead of only rank 3, you would be encouraged to rank that like 5 or 6, like whatever the system goes up to. Again, not that you have to, but you would have the option to do that. So if some of those first choices weren't viable, your vote could go further. Yeah.
The states that have implemented, do they still do a primary and general system, or does this combine it all into one? Like, you still lead with a two-party nominee after a primary and then go to the general return choice, or how does that actually?
Yeah, so his question was, in the states that have adopted this, like, did they get rid of their primary? Do they still have that? What's going on with that system? Which is a great question, and ranked choice voting can really fit into whatever voting structure we are currently using. So if you have nonpartisan elections in a city, which is, say, the city of Chicago, it totally makes sense for them to make it so they don't have runoffs. You can do it all just in one election. Makes a lot of sense. In a city like New York City, they have partisan elections. When it goes to the general, they have for, running for mayor, they've got a Republican and a Democrat. So what they did in New York City is they chose to keep the primaries there, but in the primary, they're using ranked choice voting. So what that's doing is it's making it so that Republican and that Democrat that ultimately goes to the general, they've got the majority support from the people who voted in those elections. In like statewide or federal offices, like Congress or the Illinois legislature, you're still gonna have to have the primaries because that's just how it works. Like, we just want a couple people on the ballot and maybe a third party. But again, it makes it so in the primaries, they're having to get that majority support, as opposed to what I showed in some of those early slides where you have people coming out of the primaries with such small percentages, way less than 50%. You also can see states choosing to shake up the primaries some. So that's what they did in Alaska. Alaska now uses a Final Four system. It's sometimes known as a jungle primary or a blanket primary, where instead of doing a Republican primary and a Democrat primary, they just throw all the candidates on one ballot, and then they rank them. And then the final 4 coming out of that, they go to the general, and then use ranked choice voting in the general. So there's a lot of different options with it, but ultimately, however a place chooses to use it, it's still going to be better than our current system.
Hi. So as advocates, a lot of us in this room aspiring are advocates. How do we amplify your message on the money side of things? How do you counter somebody raising as an opposition to this, the money side, and switching over systems and software? How do you counter that?
Yeah.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the question was, when we get opposition that's essentially, well, it's going to cost a lot of money to switch this over, how do we counter that? For municipalities, that hasn't been huge for us yet, just because we've been targeting places where it would be either free or relatively cheap to switch it over, so that hasn't been too much of an issue. For the legislature, we do have to address that because there are about 30 or so counties where they would need to switch their
Especially
equipment.
downstate. Right.
Yes, yeah, they just have older equipment, they haven't updated it in a while, and so they need to switch it. But with that, we just have to, it's kind of twofold. We have to make the case that ranked choice voting is a voting reform that can be so transformative that it's worth spending the money to improve our democracy, and we certainly say that. But just a very pragmatic thing that we've pointed out as well is that in the places that have that really old equipment where it just completely needs to be switched, it needed to be switched anyway. It needs to be updated. There's a lot of people that are worried about election security. that are, or not even just election security, but deal with machines breaking down and things like that. And it's when you have that older equipment. So it's kind of two birds, one stone. Is you get that upgraded equipment, and you get the ability to have ranked choice voting. Is the pitch we're making.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Along the same lines of how to advocate for it, that getting the final results. I have heard in other states it takes like up to 2 weeks to get the final results.
Mhm.
So why did that happen? And do you see that as something that can be solved here in Illinois?
Yeah, so the amount of time it takes to get the results is kind of dependent upon two things. One of them is going to be how close the races are. So sometimes sometimes you still get someone who has a clear majority, just first thing, and then that's easy. Or even if you have to go to a second round or two, it's not super tight, and so you're able to figure that out quickly. When you might get into the situation of having to wait a week or two before you get those final results is when the races are really tight, and that's because we are just having to wait for all of the mail-in or absentee ballots from from whatever the local or statewide rules are on that. And I will say it's not really any different from the current system. Again, when I was tracking those Chicago races, there were 2 or 3 aldermanic races where it was like a week and a half later, and they didn't know if their race was having to go to a runoff yet, because those mail-in ballots were just trickling in, and it was that tight that they couldn't call it yet. So that's when that happens.
How long is it gonna take to learn which beer won?
Oh, thanks for the question. I'll just take your question real quick.
So, follow up to that question. So once the votes are tabulated, the time that it takes, does it take any real additional time to rerun the system, or is it just pretty much this happens?
No, yeah, as long as, once you have the votes in, it's really easy with the system. Yeah, pushing buttons. So anyone who did paper ballots, you want to turn those in. It'll take just a minute to get those entered, and then we can reveal the results of the review poll.
You mentioned there are instances where there's a voter, they pick one, they don't bother with ranked choice voting. In that instance, calculate the majority, the base that the majority is calculated on. Does that still include that one person that opted not to use ranked choice voting later on? Or is it, okay, it's not the majority, second round, okay, goodbye. I realize that is a very tricky question that some people may not be ready for. How much you're going to get so bad. It's not quite imaginary numbers, but it's
So I just had another question. She asked how this would work with the Electoral College. So that's specifically speaking to the presidential elections. And the way this would work is, so the Electoral College, again, that's just a system that's in place. Ranked choice voting isn't changing that. But the way it would work is theoretically you could have some states that are flipping the way, either flipping blue or red, whatever, who wins those electoral votes. Because, again, we have third-party candidates right now, and there are a certain amount of people who vote for those third-party candidates, and they're pulling votes away from the Republican or the Democrat, and it's always going to be a Republican or a Democrat that gets those Electoral College votes. So if those voters are actually able to put in their second choices, then we might see some changes in how the states go. But it still works within that system.
Do you see opposition to ranked choice voting from people who prefer the abolishment of the electoral system at the federal level?
It's so funny.
He was saying, is there any opposition from people who are just like, let's just get rid of the Electoral College? Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, there are some, we've gotten, and it's very diffuse, but we get a tiny bit of opposition from some groups that are like, we want multi-member districts. Probably some of you in Illinois remember when we had multi-member districts here. Do you, like, it used to be really cool? Yeah. So we used to have that in Illinois, and it was a good thing. We didn't have ranked choice voting with it, but it was still better than what we have right now. So some people will be advocating for that, and many of us at Fairvote Illinois, we're not opposed to that at all, but we're trying to get ranked choice voting because that's a realistic reform we can work on, and we think it'll still help a lot. Okay, cool. All right, so I think I'm gonna get behind my computer for just a second and figure out these results. Sorry.
It has to happen.
Okay, I'm just gonna stay down here because we're seeing this all in real time. And it's just gonna play a few times. So yeah, so we can see the first round. No one got the majority, but Munich Light was winning, and then it's even closer to winning. And now it's the winner. I kind of figured Munich Light might be the winner. But yeah, but we can see at the beginning how it's, that first choice preference is really, it's all across the board. So, Munich Light for everyone ultimately, and hopefully people are happy with that if that's what's chosen for the party. Yeah, so that took 3 rounds to figure out, which again, it's gonna be very typical in a lot of elections. Yeah, Mark put this in for us, so thank you, Mark. But yeah.
Okay, everybody, you can stay here and finish your beer if you like. Again, I want to thank you all so much for your cooperation and for being such good sports in what was obviously not an ideal circumstance in terms of seating and everything. But again, I hope you learned a lot. I think this is a really interesting concept, and I think it's something that would really benefit a lot of us in this country. So spread the word. Thank you again for coming, and like I said, feel free to stay and finish your beer.